Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 3rd, 2019, and we are back in full effect. We are live. It's been, since I think last time I was on live was late July 2019. I've been in and out of town. Last weekend I was speaking in Washington, D.C. on the Black Agenda Tour, and then the next day I was speaking in Richmond, Virginia at the Pan-African Festival in Richmond, Virginia. So we have a lot to talk about tonight, okay? We're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, as well as on 910 AM Superstation's fan page, 910 AM Superstation on Facebook. So share this broadcast with your friends. All right, well, a lot of people have been talking about the film Harriet, about the life of Harriet Tubman, abolitionist Harriet Tubman, who escaped from slavery in 1849. It did $12 million this weekend over the course of 3 days. The movie has sparked controversy. We have with us in our first hour historian Jamon Jordan, who will join us to separate the fact from fiction regarding Harriet Tubman's life and regarding this film. And Jamon has seen this film. I was trying to see it this evening before the show, and I was at an event before the show. It ran late. Wasn't able to see the movie, but I have a lot of historical documentation dealing with the history and the life of Harriet Tubman, as well as the Underground Railroad. So this is going to be a real history lesson for you, and we'll try not to do any spoilers of the movie, but we probably will. Secondly, in our second hour, I'm going to share with you the presentation I did at the Pan-African Festival, Pan-African Unity Festival in Richmond, Virginia. But also this past Thursday, the House of Representatives took a formal vote for the impeachment inquiry into Donald Trump. So we saw that heated up this past week. We'll talk about that some as well. And then August 22nd was Black Women's Equal Pay Day. Black Women's Equal Pay Day. Now, August 22nd is the date that it takes the average African-American woman to make the same amount of money that the average white male made the previous year. It takes the average African-American woman 20 months to make the same amount of money that the average white male makes in 12 months. And the average African-American woman makes 61 cents on the dollar, and she loses, check this out, over the course of a 40-year working career, the average African-American woman loses $946,000. We're going to talk about that in our second hour. Black Women's Equal Pay highlights the fact that the average black woman loses $946,000 over a 40-year working career, and what can be done about it. Also, we know this past week, we lost the longest-serving African-American congressman in Congress, Representative John Conyers. His funeral is tomorrow. We'll talk some in the second hour about Representative John Conyers. And then there's a new study that came out this past week that shows that every living person alive today descended from an African woman who lived in Botswana about 200,000 years ago. We're going to talk about that as well. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the show. We deal with current events in history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, the 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the information right there on the homepage to sign up. And you can also donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. That helps us keep doing the research, helps me to cover expenses when I have to travel out of town. I will be speaking in Houston, Texas, the weekend of November 8th and November 9th. We'll be at the Shrine of the Black Madonna on Saturday, Shrine of the Black Madonna Cultural Center. We'll be there with Michi X and Dr. Shauna and Q Butter, and a host of other people. Visit the blackagendamovement.com, theblackagendamovement.com for more information. We also have the information at our website, africanhistorynetwork.com, africanhistorynetwork.com. Well, in the studio with me, we have historian Jamon Jordan. How you doing tonight, Jamon?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, I've had you on the show before. We've been on other people's shows here on 910 AM, the Superstation. We were Facebook friends. I follow. I look at your Facebook posts every day, and I saw some of your posts dealing with the film Harriet. And you have actually, one, you are a historian,
yes,
which is extremely important. Two, you saw the film Harriet.
That's right.
All right, and also shout out to Dr. Kafense Chike,
yes,
who hosts the Get Up Stand Up show, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. He's a historian as well,
that's right,
PhD in Africana Studies. And last night on his show, you know, he talked about the film, and he talked about how he endorses the film. It's good for us to see it. Film's not perfect, but
right,
you and he are two people who would know more than most of the people who are objecting to it, because you two are historians.
Yes, that's right.
So tell me, what did you think about the film?
The film is a good film. Okay, so it's not perfect,
right,
in history, but no film dealing with history in general, not just African American history.
Right.
No film dealing with history, if it's a feature film with actors and a director and a script writer and all of that, no film is perfect.
Right.
Some are horrible. I mean, they totally depart from history. There's no piece of history, even though they claim to be a historical film. And of course, in those films, they ought not be seen.
Right.
But other films highlight important parts of history, even though it's not 100% a historically accurate film.
Exactly.
If you're looking for a historically perfectly accurate film, or more accurate, even they are 100% accurate, you're looking for a documentary.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you're looking for. And since this is not a documentary, this is a Hollywood feature film, then
Right,
you ought to go in expecting that there's going to be some parts that are going to depart from the historical record.
Right.
And so I go in with that. And as a historian, I have a love-hate relationship with historical
Me
films,
too,
because sometimes they just go too far in creating a fictitious story.
Right.
This film highlights important aspects of history that ought to be seen. So it's a good film. And like I said, it's not perfect.
Right.
It's a good film. And I understand that there are people who don't want to see it for whatever reason, and I'm not going to try to convince them that they're wrong for not seeing it. I'm going to tell you the reasons why it is a good film that can be seen. For those people who are not, who are on the fence and don't know whether or not they want to see it or not, I'm talking to many of those people tonight about that film.
Well, not only that, in addition to seeing the film, after the film, people should really study the life of Harriet Tubman.
That's right.
Study the history of the Underground Railroad, the
That's
real
right,
history of the Underground Railroad,
That's
not
right,
the history that we were taught in school.
That's right.
And three, study the history of the institution of slavery in this country.
That's right.
And contrary to popular belief, one of the things I talked about in my when I spoke in Richmond, Virginia at the Pan-African Unity Festival last weekend, and in the second hour I'm going to play that lecture, that speech I gave in its entirety. Codified slave laws didn't exist in 1619 in the British colonies. Okay? Those 29 Africans who come into Virginia, Point Comfort, actually Hampton, Virginia, they're put into a form of indentured servitude. The first British colony of the 13 colonies to have codified slave laws was Massachusetts in 1641. They come to Virginia in 1661. They come to the different colonies at different points in time.
That's right.
The whole way that this history evolves is different than the way most of us think that it evolves.
That's right.
You know, this is why people should read Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., especially chapter 2, and then go in the back of the book and read the chronology of milestones in history, and go to 1641, where he lays out when codified slave laws come to the different colonies. Okay, so wanted to talk about some of the positive, so talk about some of the positive historical references that are made in the film Harriet. So and also, by the way, the film did 12 million this weekend, came in at number 4. Go to boxofficemojo.com, boxofficemojo.com. You can see the weekend tallies. It came in number 4, did 12 million. Go ahead.
Yeah, so understand that the film is telling a larger story about the Underground Railroad, the abolitionist movement, and the history of slavery, using the story of Harriet Tubman to highlight as much of this larger history than just Harriet Tubman's history.
Exactly.
And of course, they highlight some important parts of Harriet's personal history as well. So let's start with the most important aspect of the film, is that it portrays the Underground Railroad and the abolitionist movement in general, but the Underground Railroad specifically, as a black-led movement.
Correct.
That's one of the problems of the way that many of us learned about the Underground Railroad. I was taught about it almost as a white savior movement.
Yes.
Particularly Quakers. And
exactly.
That the Underground Railroad was mainly Quakers saving black people from slavery, and African Americans were just the recipients of the beneficence of white leaders of the Underground Railroad.
Right.
Now let's understand what the Underground Railroad really is. It's one of the most radical movements in America's history. It is one of the radical wings of the abolitionist movement, which is a much larger movement, not just the Underground Railroad. The abolitionist movement is a movement that's fighting against slavery on many fronts, not just helping them escape from slavery, but the Underground Railroad is one of the most radical parts of the abolitionist movement, and it's led by African Americans. Black people are the leaders of the Underground Railroad.
And we were the majority of the people who made up the Underground Railroad. Yes, there were white abolitionists, but we were the majority.
And it's important to understand that the white abolitionists don't lose their identity as being heroes once we realize they were allies of black leaders.
Exactly.
You know, so I know we like to talk about William Lloyd Garrison and Thomas Garrett and Levi Coffin and some of these other leaders of the Underground, these whites who were part of the Underground Railroad, and they're important. They're not less important now that we know that they didn't run the whole thing.
Exactly.
All right, so once we know that African Americans, Harriet Tubman is not the anomaly. She's not the exception. That's the way the Underground Railroad works. Black people leading, organizing, and working on the Underground Railroad with assistance from some white allies.
Right. And then also William Steele, the abolitionist who was on the Underground Railroad.
Yes.
He's depicted in the film also.
That's right. So I'm going to talk about him too.
Okay.
But I want to center the Underground Railroad with black people. They're the center of it. So that's the most important aspect of the film. When you see the film, you would not leave the film thinking that the Underground Railroad was white people saving black people from slavery, and as if black people had no agency of their own to free themselves. That's the first thing, because we're used to giving that agency away, whether we're giving it to Quakers, whether we're giving it to Abraham Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation, whether we're giving it to the radical Republicans in Congress who passed the 13th Amendment. We're used to giving the agency of freedom for black people away to others.
Right.
And we don't see this agency of black people that worked on every level to end slavery. And the Underground Railroad is one of the most effective ways that black people led to end slavery. Exactly. And so we learn that. That's one of the most important aspects that the film highlights. So many other films talking about the Underground Railroad do not do that.
Right.
The second thing that's important is the connection between faith and freedom in the African American community. Today we're used to disconnecting these two. So we think of mega churches, particularly African American mega churches that may be run by some of the most famous preachers in the country right now, Creflo Dollar, T.D. Jakes, and we see that outside of the Black freedom movement.
Right.
But in the 1800s, faith and freedom is the same thing. Yes. Those aren't two separate movements. People who are starting churches, people who are leaders of churches, are the same people helping people escape from slavery.
Right.
And so the Underground Railroad and the abolitionist movement is really is centered in the black church. And you see it in the film personally with Harriet. So Harriet's personal faith is a large part of what she's doing. She doesn't separate her faith, her Christian faith, from her helping people escape from slavery. In fact, her carrying out her Christian faith is to help people escape from slavery. Right. And many people may not know, but Harriet Tubman was a devout member of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. And she's going to be, for many years, for decades, a member of the church in Auburn, New York, the same church that Frederick Douglass is a member. Right. And we separate them. We put Harriet Tubman in the freedom box, and we put Frederick Douglass in the freedom box. But they're really in the faith and freedom box. You could put them just as strongly in the faith box as you could put them in the freedom box. People who met Harriet Tubman always talked about her strong devotion to faith. Some people said they've never seen anybody who was more devoted to their religion than Harriet Tubman. Her psalm book, her hymn book, is in the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So even an artifact of her faith still exists that you can go look at right now. Here, Frederick Douglass, for instance, is an ordained minister, and many people don't know that.
Right.
So faith and freedom go hand in hand. Even here in the city of Detroit,
yes.
Second Baptist Church, of course, is the foundation for the Underground Railroad.
Yes.
But it is also the center of faith for the African American community. It's the first black church in the state of Michigan.
Right. And then, you know, I was downtown just a few days ago, coming back from the barbershop, and there's a historical marker dealing with the meeting between Frederick Douglass and John Brown.
That's right.
That's
exactly
on
right.
Is that
St. Antoine and Congress.
St. Antoine and Congress.
That's right.
In the home of William Webb,
That's
200 feet north of this spot.
That's right.
Two famous Americans met several Detroit Negro residents on March 12, 1859 to discuss methods of abolishing American Negro slavery. John Brown, fiery anti-slavery leader, ardently advocated insurrectionary procedures,
Yes.
and 8 months later became a martyr to the cause. Frederick Douglass, ex-slave and internationally recognized anti-slavery orator and writer, sought a solution through political means and orderly democratic process. Although they differed on tactics to be used, they were united in the immortal cause of American Negro freedom. That's from the historical marker. Mm-hmm. Now, when we come back from the break, because of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, this caused a lot of abolitionists to become more revolutionary.
That's right.
Okay, we'll deal with that on the other side of the break. 9:10 a.m. Superstation, Michael Imhotep, the African History Network show. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, we'll be back in 2 minutes. We're still live on Facebook.
Yeah, so the
right
next three things I'm going to talk about is women in the Underground Railroad, William Steele, and 1850 Fugitive Slave Act.
The 1850 Fugitive Slave Act.
Those are the last three things I want to make sure I talk about.
And the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act was really revolutionary. And then from that, you're going to get Harriet Beecher Stowe, 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin. 2 years later, the founding of the Republican Party, 1854.
That's right.
To be the counter to the Democratic Party.
That's right.
All this, so we have to understand this chronology of history. Most of the people complaining about the movie, number one, don't understand history. Because the historians that I know, Dr. Ray Winbush also saw the movie.
That's right.
And he said he liked it.
That's right.
And people need to go see it.
That's
He's
right.
a historian.
That's
Dr.
right.
Kafense Chike, who does his show here,
That's
PhD, Africana Studies as well.
Yeah.
Most of the people popping their guns, running their mouths, are not breaking down any of this history,
That's
can't provide you sources, okay, and haven't seen the film. All right, so
so you're going to be having this Thomas guy called in last night.
I'm broadcasting live on Facebook.
Yeah,
Okay.
he is not a fan of it.
Okay, we'll come to him when I get a chance to. All right.
9:10 a.m.
Okay, so we'll get to that. All right, so stand by. I'm going to give you all the names of some articles. I already started posting one. Who really ran the Underground Railroad? Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. wrote this article March 25th, 2013 for theroot.com. I read it when it came out. And this breaks down how we were the ones running the Underground Railroad.
30 seconds.
And it starts towards the end of slavery, 1831. Okay? But then you got Underground Railroads going through Texas into Mexico when Texas wins their independence in 1836. Mexico wins their independence in Mexico wins their independence, I think, 1828.
Okay,
Mexico 1828.
Guerrero in slavery.
Vicente Guerrero, the first president of Mexico, who was a former slave.
That's right.
All right, you guys. Let's do this.
You ready?
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 3rd, 2019, and we are live. We have a fantastic show here. I'm speaking with historian Jamon Jordan. We're talking about the film Harriet, which did $12 million this year, about the life of abolitionist Harriet Tubman, and we're having a greater discussion about correcting the history of slavery and how you can learn from this movie as well and what this movie gets right about history. I want to let you know that Saturday, November 9th, I will be in Houston, Texas at the Shrine of the Black Madonna Bookstore and Cultural Center, 5309 Martin Luther King Boulevard, Houston, Texas. I'll be there with Michi X on the Black Agenda Tour, Dr. Shana Etienne, Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad, Golden Child Q Butter, hosted by Danette Hollowell. We have this information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. There's a link there to the BlackAgendaMovement.com, BlackAgendaMovement.com. You can get your tickets, and then there's a Friday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Community organizing forum. I'm not sure the location there. That Friday event is free. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It helps us keep doing the research, pay the bills, stay on the air. Helps to cover expenses when I have to speak out of town also. And we have a new bundle pack, 6 of my latest presentations from this year. The Black Migrations bundle pack is 60. We have it in digital download format, and it's on sale this weekend. That's on sale, what is it, $40, I think it is on sale. So we'll post the link here, and it's on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so we're speaking with Jamon Jordan. So Jamon, right before the break, we were talking about the film Harriet. We talked about how it was African Americans who were the ones in control of the Underground Railroad.
That's right.
A good article that people should read is from TheRoot.com, March 25th, 2013, written by Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. I'm not a big fan of Gates, but he does do some good research, and I give him credit for that. Who really ran the Underground Railroad? Who really ran the Underground Railroad? And he breaks down a lot of this history. So, and then also, we were talking about the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850.
That's right. That's right.
So, what was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850?
All right. So, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 is part of the Missouri. It's part of the
Missouri Compromise.
1850 Compromise.
Yeah.
It's part of the 1850 Compromise because the United States is expanding, and slave states really want the United States government to stand behind slavery.
Right.
Because, of course, many of the free soilers, and those are people who do not want the new territories to have slavery. So they're not abolitionists. Free soilers aren't all abolitionists.
Right.
Free soilers just believe that these new territories shouldn't have slavery.
Right.
And that slavery should not be expanded throughout the country.
Right. They have different reasons
And
why.
they have different reasons why.
Because one reason is because enslaved Africans provided competition for white
workers.
For white workers.
That's
yes.
right. So,
because you can't work cheaper than free.
and
Go
so
ahead.
the Southern leaders are trying to press the government to do something to stand behind slavery.
Right.
One of the things they get out of that is the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, which is the most strict fugitive slave law that America's had. America's had 3 fugitive slave laws, one inside of the United States Constitution itself.
Right, Article 4, Section 2.
That's right. And
Yes.
then the second one, the Fugitive Slave Law 1793, which is passed 2 years after the Haitian Revolution that started.
Right,
Which is one of the
1791.
impetus for that Fugitive Slave Act. And then, of course, the most strict Fugitive Slave Act, which is the one in 1850, which has just passed a couple of months after Harriet Tubman has escaped.
Right.
So,
Right, she escapes in 1849.
and so a few months later, the Fugitive Slave Act is passed.
Right.
So I'm going to talk later about the Fugitive Slave Act. So we've already talked about the fact that the black people led the Underground Railroad.
Sure.
That's an important aspect of the film that you get. Another important part you get from the film is that faith and freedom go hand in hand for African Americans in the 1800s. In the abolitionist movement, these are the same people. People who are starting churches are the same people helping people escape from slavery.
Right.
So that's one movement. The third part is women. History is less patriarchal than the way we tell it. And so what I mean by that is when stuff happened, women were doing all kinds of things.
Right. Right.
When we tell it, many times we tell it as if men did it all.
Right.
And so we talk about the men and don't focus on the women. Now, Harriet Tubman is not one of those people. We all have heard her story. But they created a character in the film, Marie Buchanan. And although she's a creative person, she's indicative of what many women were doing during the Underground Railroad.
She may be a composite
Yeah,
character.
she's not a real person, but what she is, there's many women who are helping black people escape from slavery. They are running stations on the Underground Railroad, which are safe houses, places where you can hide.
Right.
Women are doing those things. So when we look back at the history, we find women are in all these different roles in the Underground Railroad. But when we talk about it, we focus primarily on men. So that's another part that comes out in the film. And of course, two characters in the film. One is the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, which is really like a character in the film, and William Steele. William Steele was considered the director of the Underground Railroad.
Right.
This black man who many people know nothing about. Many of us know about Harriet Tubman and we know about Frederick Douglass, but we don't know about this guy William Steele. And so the filmmakers did a great job in trying to bring this man to public knowledge. People who don't know this man in Philadelphia, this wealthy black man in Philadelphia, who is funding the Underground Railroad, which would mean he would be called a stockholder on the Underground Railroad. He's a station master on the Underground Railroad. He's hiding people.
Right.
And he's also doing historical research because he's writing the stories of the people who come through his station. And so that we learn more about the Underground Railroad. These stories won't be published until after the Civil War, but it's how we learn so much about what the Underground Railroad was doing. Some of his stories are about people that end up coming to Detroit, into the Detroit part of the Underground Railroad. William Steele is in high connection with George D. Baptiste and William Lambert and William Webb and many of the other leaders of the Underground Railroad in the city of Detroit. And so we can connect these stories of the Underground Railroad largely because of the work and the painstaking work of William Steele, who is portrayed awesomely in the film.
Right.
And so we learn about this black man.
Well, you know, the criticism I hear about the film, nobody mentions William Steele.
Yeah.
I just find that very interesting.
Yeah.
How you just skip over this brother?
Who
helped finance the Underground Railroad?
That's right. So how can you miss that? It's one of the most important aspects of the film, but it's one of the most important aspects of history that people have skipped over.
Well, when you don't know who he is, it's easy to skip over.
Right. So he's not a made-up character. And then of course the last thing that's important is that we learned about the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act. Now, the event that happens after it's passed, this riot that happens in Philadelphia, that happens, Harriet Tubman is not associated with that. But these kinds of riots did happen.
Right.
And so, again, one of the things that the filmmakers are trying to do is tell a larger story about slavery and the Underground Railroad, even though all of those things didn't particularly happen to Harriet.
Right.
They're important for us to know this larger story about, we shouldn't just know about Harriet, we should know about Harriet, but we should also know this larger story about the Underground Railroad and how that kind of plays a role in Harriet's life.
With the larger story, the larger context and history
right.
that made the Underground Railroad necessary.
That's right.
That made a Harriet Tubman necessary.
That's right.
So people should come away from this movie, or even if you haven't seen the movie yet, or if you wait for it to come out on DVD or what have you, there's some articles that you can start reading right now to educate yourself and your family. One is the article from The Root, and I'm not a big fan of The Root, but still, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day. Who Really Ran the Underground Railroad? Who Really Ran the Underground Railroad by Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. Another article, and you and I are talking in the green room about this, did black people own slaves? This is another good article that and Gates wrote this. And what's interesting is that he talks about how John Hope Franklin did the research, another great historian, African-American historian.
Yes.
And the majority of Negro owners of slaves had some personal interest in their property. And basically about 1% of the same, like in 1850, about 1% of the enslaved Africans were owned by other African Americans, but about 50% of those were family members that we bought out of slavery.
That's right.
Now in the film, and then when we study the history of Harriet Tubman, you see something very strange.
That's right.
You see an enslaved African American woman married to a free African American man.
That's right.
John Tubman.
That's right.
Talk about that for a minute, please.
So one of the things that's another important part that I forgot to bring up is that the Underground Railroad is structured, of course the black church is the foundation of it, but another foundation of the Underground Railroad is family.
Yes.
It is really the connections of families, and most people are escaping because of something going on with the family. Someone's being sold away. When Harriet Tubman first escapes, which is, they don't show that in the film, but her first escape attempt is with her brothers. She first attempts to escape with her brothers, and they turn back. And so she's forced to go back. The next time she escapes on her own. But when she comes back first for her husband to help free, even though he's free, his life is constricted. His freedom is constricted because he lives in a slave state.
Exactly.
And so
there were laws regulating the movements of free African Americans during slavery in slave states.
That's right. And so she's coming back first for her family, her husband. He is, of course, now remarried. And so she does not end up escaping with him, but she escapes with other members of her family. Right. And she goes back over and over, first for her family and then for many others. And so the Underground Railroad is largely about family. Detroit stories of the Underground Railroad wouldn't exist if it wasn't for these families, the Lees, the Cooks, the Richards, the DeBaptistes, the Lamberts. These families are integral to understanding. Thornton and Ruth of Blackburn, Lucy, she would change her name too. This is important. You'd have to understand that family is the foundation, even for people who stay. So in the film, you're going to see a part where someone stays and doesn't escape with Harriet. But the reason they stay is about not wanting to break up the family.
Exactly.
And so the reason why Harriet's going back is to free family, but the reason why some people don't go with her is they don't want to lose their family.
And one of the things, when you read the article by Dr. Gates, and this is a 7-page article, one of the things he talks about how is the majority of the people who ran away on the Underground Railroad were either teenage males or in their early 20s who didn't have a family, didn't have children, things like this. And in general, it's going to be harder for a family with little children to run away for a number of reasons.
That's right.
Okay? But what we see when we study this history, we see that many African Americans chose to stay in slavery, not because they loved the slave master or they loved slavery, but because they loved their family.
That's right.
They wanted to keep the family together as much as possible and try to protect their family as much as possible.
That's right.
So another good article to read, now this just came out November 1st, 2019 from the Washington Post. What Harriet gets right about Tubman. What Harriet gets right about Tubman. In the 1850s, abolitionists, including black women, fought for freedom by force. Now, this just happens to be written by an African-American female historian, Kelly Carter Jackson, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Africana Studies at Wesley College and author of the book Force and Freedom, Black Abolitionists and the Politics of Violence. The name of this article, once again, What Harriet Gets Right About Tubman. Let's go to the phone lines quickly. Let's go to Thomas, line 1. Welcome to the African History Network show, Thomas. Thanks for holding.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm really dismayed, but, somewhat that you brothers are talking about a movie made by Comcast, those Hollywood destroyers of black people, past, present, and probably the future.
Name me the other movies by Comcast that you're complaining about, Thomas. Name me the other movies by Comcast that you're complaining about. Give me 3 of them. 1, 2, name them. Name me the other movies made by Comcast that you are complaining about. I'm not getting beefy. You're the one that brought it up. So I'm asking you a question. Thanks for calling, Thomas. Let's go to Mr. Detroit. See, now when you ask them a direct question, they can't answer the question because they haven't even thought about the question to come up with an answer. Name me the other movies from Comcast that you are complaining about. Let's go to Mr. Detroit. Hey, Mr. Detroit, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for calling. Thanks for holding.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
How you doing?
Y'all talking on something that you done touched on the Underground Railroad in Detroit, and I'm Mr. Detroit. That's one of the fourth, and so that's one of the fourth reasons what I'm fixing to say. Now, I done ran this before several times on the radio.
Okay.
Just in case you missed it, here it is here. Due to our black rich history, Detroit is the baddest city in the world for 5 reasons. Detroit the baddest
I think I heard you say this before. Go ahead.
You heard me. I think I heard this on your show.
Right.
Okay, now take it. Number 1 is Ralph Bunche. Ralph Bunche was a half-breed, just like Obama. He went to Harvard, just like Obama. Obama, the president of the United States, runs the world. Okay, so Obama ran the world for 8 years. Ralph Bunche ran the world for 20 years. He brought peace to the Middle East, independence to the Middle East, and he got some African countries their independence. Second is Joe Louis. Joe Louis beat the Nazis. Third is Elijah Muhammad. If it wasn't for Elijah Muhammad, wouldn't be no Minister Farrakhan or Malcolm X. So Detroit is Mecca to the...
Or Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali.
Of America.
Or Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali. Go ahead.
Show you right. So Detroit is Mecca to the black Muslim brothers and sisters of America. 4 is the Underground Railroad. All the slaves that came this way, once they crossed the Detroit River, they was free. And everybody know what number 5 is. Motown music.
All right.
Detroit is the baddest city in the world due to our black rich history. Y'all gentlemen have a nice evening.
All right, Mr. Detroit. Thanks for calling. All right. Now I'm going to come back to you because I think there was something, another point you wanted to make, Jamon, and we'll go back to the phone lines in a few minutes. We're coming to you, Lawrence. So stand by. Another good article to read. This is from the New York Times, October 23rd, 2019. Harriet Tubman, Facts and Myths, How the Movie Tried to Get It Right. Harriet Tubman, Facts and Myths, How the Movie Tried to Get It Right. The filmmakers pored over books, documents, and other research to remind viewers of the woman behind the often distorted legend. And one of the things they talk about is how, so first of all, one of the reasons, a lot of the things that we were taught in school about Harriet Tubman is false or grossly exaggerated. Okay,
that's right.
And I think one of the ways that the problems happen is that Harriet Tubman was illiterate. Okay, but I'm not saying it's her fault.
Yeah.
But she can neither read nor write, so she couldn't write her own autobiography like Frederick Douglass did.
That's right.
Douglass wrote 3 autobiographies.
That's right.
Okay, so it's left up to other people to write about her.
That's right.
All right. So the first autobiography
is Sarah Bradford.
Sarah Hopkins Bradford,
Yeah.
Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman, 1869, and this put forth some of
fantastic stories.
Some fantastic stories, distorted stories about Harriet Tubman. One was dealing with having freed about 300 slaves.
Yeah.
When it was really more about 70. Not to diminish what Harriet did, but this is what Harriet talked about herself.
Yeah, I want to address that.
Go ahead.
So Harriet Tubman, people know or should know that she was a Union soldier. She was a spy and a scout for the Union Army. War. For the Union Army during the Civil War. And during the war, African Americans, black people who fought in the war, were paid a lower salary than white soldiers. If you saw Glory, that was one of the important highlights of that historical film. That they showed that the black soldiers protested the fact that they were being paid less than white soldiers. Well, that happened to Harriet too. As great as Harriet was, she was discriminated against in the Union Army with her pay. After the war was over, she had to fight to get her pension. So that took years. When she finally gets her pension, it's not substantial. And then it's a fight again. Sarah Mae Bradford, who was really like a fan. She's a writer, but she's a writer, but she's a fan of Harriet Tubman. She's trying to raise money to help Harriet Tubman. So she writes this book with stories that kind of she stretches the truth. Making Harriet, who was already a superwoman, you don't have to really add anything to it, but she did to try to even sell the book to even more people. And so that helped raise some funds for Harriet Tubman, who for a period of time after the Civil War was really struggling to make ends meet. And so that's part of the reason, the impetus for that first biography that Sarah Bradford writes about Harriet Tubman. And but even with the argument about the bounty on her head, the $40,000 bounty, which of course no one's putting bounties on people on that level of bounties in the 1850s. Nobody's putting those level of bounties on people. The one
on John Wilkes Booth was $50,000.
So nobody's doing that for a person who is helping people escape from slavery. But the amounts of bounties that she did have against her, that would have been substantial. And even though she probably didn't rescue 300 people during the Underground Railroad, of course, during the Civil War, as a spy and a scout.
There you go.
When she raised the Combahee River, when she leads the soldiers in the Combahee River raid, and
June 2nd, 1863,
and goes through those plantations, she frees at least 700 people in that one river raid. So she's definitely a superwoman, even if Sarah Bradford exaggerated during the Underground Railroad period, during the Civil War. She frees over 700 people in just one river raid. So she's still a superwoman, no matter how you slice it. I do want to address, I know some of the problems that people have with the film. So let's first, we already had a caller call in about Comcast. And
you posted about the lawsuit.
So I want to say about Comcast that my defense of this film is not dealing with the Comcast issue. The Comcast issue needs its own discussion. And I want to separate that from talking about this film, Harriet. And of course, Comcast is involved in a lot of stuff that people watch. I'm not saying
nobody's talking about boycotting all the other stuff Comcast put out. I just find that very interesting.
And I'm going to say that if you want to boycott Comcast, I'm not frowning on you for that. But be clear that means a lot. So no channel, no WDIV,
no NBC, no MSNBC,
no MSNBC.
Get rid of your Comcast cable.
Don't go to
get rid of your Xfinity. Now, so if they did all of that, then I could say, okay, that makes sense. But if you want to take this movie and none of the other movies Comcast put out, that don't make no damn sense. I'm sorry.
Right. So sometimes it is black creation that bears the brunt of our
antagonism,
our disagreements with white corporations.
Right.
We are upset with white corporations, but we take it out on black creations.
Right.
Not on all the other stuff.
Now, not only that, I bet you get was it Hobbs and Shaw on Comcast pay-per-view.
Right.
When it comes out Tuesday.
Right. So I just want us to. So I want that to be kept in mind. The other thing I want to talk about is this actress.
Yes.
So a lot of people have a problem with this actress. I want to be clear that I'm not also arguing in defense of her. So I want to be clear that I'm talking about the film.
Right.
I'm not arguing on defense of Comcast. I'm not defending Comcast.
Right.
I'm not defending Cynthia Erivo and her statements that she's made on Twitter about African Americans. I want to be clear about that. I saw the film because it's about Harriet.
Exactly.
Had it been a film about Cynthia Erivo, I would not have gone to the film.
And if Harriet made the statements that Cynthia made, then okay, now we have an argument.
Right.
But Harriet was not the one that made the statements.
Right.
It was Cynthia.
Yeah, right.
The movie's not about Cynthia. It's about Harriet.
Yep. She's
William
an actress.
Steele.
Right.
The Underground Railroad. Black abolitionists.
Right.
Family.
Yeah.
Faith. All of that.
So she's an actress, and I'm sure that many actresses and actors in many films that we love have said or done some things that we don't like.
Just go back in their timeline far enough, and you're gonna find something you disagree with.
Now I'll critique what they did, but that doesn't mean that I don't like the film they played.
Exactly.
All right. So that's the second thing I want to say. And then of course the third thing that a lot of people have a problem with is the created character in the film. Who I'm not going to give his name because I've done enough spoiling today as it is. I don't want to spoil it all
You don't want to tell his name?
But there's a black slave catcher in the film.
Right.
And this, of course, this particular character is created. But I want you to understand something. The idea of blacks being slave catchers is not a created idea.
Exactly.
That is historical. There were some people who were paid by whites to help them capture people who had escaped.
Well,
so that
they still got something to do.
Right. So
the
idea is true, but not that particular character.
Right.
But what people have been distorting is the idea that it was this man who was the major antagonist of Harriet in the film. He is not the main antagonist.
Exactly.
The slave owner, the white slave owner of Harriet, is the main antagonist of Harriet in the film. This guy is an ally, an employee who works for this white slave owner. And then the other part that people are saying is that it was the white slave owner that saved Harriet. And so they made the slave owner the savior. That is a strong distortion of what really happened in the film. And I don't want to tell what happens in the film. You really have to see it. But I will outline the fact that there is a part where the black slave catcher is about to kill Harriet. And the white slave owner doesn't save Harriet. What he does is he wants to be the one to capture Harriet, not this black slave catcher. He wants to be the one so that he can torture her and either sell or kill her. That's the reason why he deals with the black slave catcher the way he deals with him. Not because he was trying to save Harriet. It's distorting the truth to come up with, you really got to dance all the way around the film to try to come up with the black guy was the bad guy and the white guy was the hero.
Well, it's easy to do that, Jamon, when you haven't seen the film and you're going off of BS you see on social media repeating nonsense.
Right.
It's easy to do that. Right. The same effort to sabotage the Nate Parker movie, Birth of a Nation, about the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831 in Southampton County, Virginia. We see the same effort here.
Yeah, you got to separate well, I don't say you have to, but I many times have to. And there's sometimes you can't. I understand. If that's your conviction, if that's your spirit that you can't separate the two, then you have to do what you have to do. but many times I have to separate the lives of the actors
Yeah.
from the roles they're portraying. So I saw Birth of a Nation.
Yeah.
Even though all of those allegations, of course, in the stories about Nate Parker was going on, of course, his career has taken a major dive because of it.
Right.
But the film, the story of Nat Turner, is a story that we ought to have seen.
Well, not only that, people have been trying for about 50 years to make a theatrical movie about Nat Turner.
Right.
And he pulled it off. People have been trying for decades to make a theatrical movie about Harriet Tubman. There was the 1978 made-for-TV movie. Starring
A Woman Called Moses.
A Woman Called Moses, right. But this was the first one in the theater to focus on Harriet Tubman.
That's right. And I also want people to go back and get A Woman Called Moses. Go back and get that. You can get it on DVD. You can go and get it on however you order your films.
YouTube.
Might be on YouTube.
Yep.
Go back and watch that, because even that film highlighted some very important parts of Harriet Tubman's history that sometimes we don't talk about and we've forgotten. It came out as a 2-part miniseries. And of course, this is in the era of Roots. So Roots had come out the year before, and so there were people trying to make other films about other stories, and Harriet Tubman came out the next year.
And then I saw some people saying, well, why are they making another slave movie after the film Black Panther? Well, you have to understand, this movie was 5.5 years in the making.
Right.
Movies just don't come out they don't just come up with a concept, write the script, film it in like a year.
And the other thing is,
these are years in the making.
When people say, I don't want to see no more slave movies, or I'm upset about slave movies. Harriet Tubman, that's really how we think of the story of Harriet Tubman, that it's just another slave movie?
No.
How are we going to talk about Harriet Tubman? Yeah, you got to talk about slavery,
right.
But it's no way that you can skip over talking about the story of Harriet Tubman and people like Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey and Frederick Douglass. You got to talk about these people. And if you view that as just another slave movie, then you're historically naive and intellectually dishonest about really talking about history. Because no way that you can talk about these icons of black history without, at least on some level, discussing slavery.
Right, and I'm critical of slave movies in general, but Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman were two different types of slave movies. Even 12 Years a Slave, which I didn't see in the theater, because in general, I don't, the people who know me know I don't go see slave movies in the theater. Even Nat Turner, I couldn't see because it's too traumatic to me. The last thing you want me to do is go see a slave movie in the theater, because you're going to see me on 11 o'clock news. I'm just telling you right now. So I have to watch it like in 20-minute increments. And like when I watched Django, and that wasn't even true.
Right.
When I watched Django, because I was talking about it on one of my shows, it took me 3 days to get through that movie.
That's right.
And that movie wasn't even true.
Right.
Okay, so we're coming up on the break. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Lawrence. Hey, Lawrence, thanks for holding. Welcome to the African History Network show. Go ahead with your question or comment, Lawrence. Where you calling from also, Lawrence?
First of all, I want to say thank you guys for the knowledge that you guys offered today. It was well worth the wait for me to sit up here. And I also want to say personally, I'm glad you're back on the radio. I kind of tuned out this station. And then I listened to it. And you back on, so I'm a supporter, and I'm going to support you in other ways also.
Thanks, my man.
But I want to say this here. I watched the movie last night with my wife.
Okay.
She hates one of these types of movies with slavery in it. Because the brutality that's in it is always depicted like homicide. It was beaten, it was enslaved.
And that's understandable. That's understandable.
Let me say this.
Go ahead.
Let me say this, brother. This movie here that I watched last night, it seems like the writers purposely left that part of. They showed a few when they take off the shirt, they show the whips and so forth. But a movie like this, you can be a white audience and walk away pretty comfortable, but maybe it wasn't that brutal of an experience. This my feeling. Your guess might be different, but you did not see the brutality in this movie. So even a lot of little kids, in some scenes, people in the audience that were sitting out there with us was laughing. It was like some comical. So
we're coming up on the break, Lawrence. So I'm gonna let Jamon respond, but we're coming up on the break. But one of the things with this having a PG-13 rating, I think they had, and you got to keep in mind, oftentimes there are deleted scenes, and scenes are deleted, so it may get a PG-13 rating, or it may get an R rating if it's too extreme. But by having a PG-13 rating, it can reach more children. And our children need to see this movie. The parents need to see this movie. Just one second. Their parents need to see this movie, because I do lectures around this country. And Americans in general, not just African Americans, Americans in general are woefully ignorant of history. Let Jamon respond, and then we'll hold you over on the break, Lawrence.
Yeah, I just want to say very quickly that it's definitely clear that the filmmakers purposefully highlighted the fact that slavery is brutal, but without showing that particular brutality. So they showed you the effects of the brutality without showing you the actual brutal incidents, because many people cannot take it. And that's been a major critique. Sadly, on one level, that's been a major critique of slave movies, that it's just too brutal. And people
12 Years a Slave.
12 Years a Slave. And the beating of Kunta Kinte in Roots, when they wanted him to change his name to Toby. Some people just cannot take it, and because of that, that's been a major critique of slave movies. I'm not going to see no slave movie where they're going to beat the guy. So a lot of people say that kind of stuff. Now me, I go to them either way, whether they're full brutal or, because if to me, if you can go see Boys in the Hood and Minister Society and see the brutality in those kinds of films, then I feel like I got to make myself go see 12 Years a Slave, which of course was very brutal. And so, but the filmmakers, I'm clear on the fact that the filmmakers purposefully showed you the effects of brutality, but didn't show you the actual brutality happening. And they purposely did that so that it would allow people who would otherwise not be able to take the film to be able to take the film.
Exactly. And at the same time, you can educate people on that as well. But one of the biggest things that people should take away from this film, or even if they don't go see the film, one of the biggest things people should take away is to research Harriet Tubman, separate the fact from the fiction, read the articles that I'm giving you all, because I've gone through and read all these articles, okay? Another good one is Myths and Facts About Harriet Tubman from the National Park Service. Myths and Facts About Harriet Tubman from the National Park Service. The majority of the information we were taught in school about Harriet Tubman is false, okay? It's just like the myth. Harriet Tubman sang "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," wade in the water, and followed the drinking gourd as signals of the Underground Railroad. Well, "Follow the Drinking Gourd" was written and performed by the Weavers, which was a white folk group, in 1947. But a lot of this stuff was taught to us as children, and it's just false. But this is a time for the truth to come out. Okay, so you got to get out of here, right?
Yeah, I can stay a little bit longer.
Okay, we're gonna hold by popular demand. We're gonna hold Jamon over against the break. After the break, you listen to 910 AM, the Superstation Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep, the African History Network show. We'll be back in a few minutes. African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Current promotion, get 3 months for the price of one. We'll let you know how you can advertise with us. So we have a couple new advertisers. Also, if you are in the market to buy a car, you want to visit Car Marshall. Now, visit Car Marshall to purchase a new or used car. And I'm going to post a link here. Click on the link below. And Car Marshall will help you find and negotiate buying a new vehicle. They have over 100,000 new and used cars from dealers. And Car Marshall, you shop, they negotiate. Okay, they make it very easy for you. We'll post a link here for Car Marshall. You can use this website to find cars all across the country, and they connect you with African American dealerships, and they can also connect you with lending sources also.
The day you lose your strength.
All right, stand by. Okay, so and then
go 10-15 minutes.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then so wrap up with your last comment. What I want to do, I want to share this paragraph here.
Okay.
This is from. Did you see this article?
Yeah, I've seen that article. Yeah, I've seen that.
I got all. Man, I went through, read all these. Man, I stayed up late last night reading through all these articles, and most of the people who are complaining about the film are not going to share any of these articles. They may share one or two, but not share them and really put them in the proper context. Okay. So, all right. All right, guys, we'll be back in a few minutes. Hey, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. PayPal.me/the AHN Show. Or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AJT, do me a favor. Can you turn that down here a little bit, please?
Yes.
And also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. I will be in Houston, Texas, with Michi X and Dr. Shauna Etienne and Q Butter for the Black Agenda Tour. This is November 9th at the Shrine of the Black Madonna Cultural Center in Houston, Texas. Okay, so we're going to post that information here also. Here we go. Let's see. We'll post that information. How's everybody doing tonight? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. This type of information you're not going to get most other places. Okay? Tell me, where have you heard this type of conversation about this film this week, or last week, or week before last? All right, so who we have here? We've got Eric, we've got Lila, we've got Amber. How you doing, Amber? Christopher, Leroy. Who else? Sharon. Okay. Michael Long, Sharon, Amani, Terry Toussaint. Okay. Erica, how you doing, Erica? Erica Watson, Ashley, Dr. Ashley Jones. Just a few of the people watching here. We're going to come back. I'm going to give you some more articles. You got to research this information, okay? Share this information with your children. Okay, here we go. Share this information with your children, okay? Most of what we learned about Harriet Tubman in school was false. All right, we'll be back in. Okay, how much time we have before we come back?
1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute. We'll be back in 1 minute, everybody. All right, and then also, okay, so you got the link, the YouTube link I sent you.
Yes.
I'm going to share with you the presentation I did last week in Richmond, Virginia at the Pan-African Unity Festival. It's going to blow you away, because I'm dropping history on people, and most of the people there didn't know the history I'm dropping on them, and I was like one of the youngest people there. You know, so once again, this is why this type of information has to get out. This is why this show is so important. All right. This is why I'm glad we're back on live and baseball is over with. Okay, we posted that information. And then also, all of my DVD lectures are available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And we have the Black Migrations
5 seconds.
DVD bundle pack and digital download bundle pack. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 3rd, 2019. And we are live. We're in our second hour. It's a fantastic second hour. People going crazy on Facebook. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. The African History Network. You're not going to hear this type of conversation many other places. I'm speaking with a fellow historian, Jamon Jordan. You've seen him here on the African History Network show. You've heard him on 910 AM, the Superstation. We're discussing the film Harriet, about the life of Harriet Tubman.
Yes,
the film Harriet has sparked controversy, and we're separating fact from fiction. And Jamon has seen the film. I haven't seen it. I've read a lot about the film. I've read a lot of historical articles about Harriet Tubman, as well as what the film gets right about history. So, Jamon, go ahead. Right before the break, we were talking about the film, and I was talking about how one of the myths about Harriet Tubman that we learned in school is that she sang "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," wade in the water, and follow the drinking gourd as signals on the Underground Railroad. Follow the drinking gourd wasn't written until 1947. Slavery ended a few years before that. It ended in 1865. Okay, and then also "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" was written and composed after the Civil War by an Afro-Cherokee Indian living in Oklahoma. So that's not true either. Go ahead, brother.
So I was just going to just finish up the statement that I said earlier about the violence in the film. Mm-hmm. So again, a lot of times what we found is that people, although on one level there are people who want to see slavery capture in its full violent level, which you could never capture. You can never capture the level of brutality of slavery in a film.
Right.
So that's the first thing. But some people want that, but then there's another group of people who can't take that. You know, so on one level, we all know, anybody who has a cursory knowledge of slavery knows it was a brutal institution.
Yes.
So everybody knows that it's brutal, even if physical violence ain't the main reason of brutality, but separating people from their children, mothers from their children, and husbands from wives, and the rape, all of those things is, of course, a major part of slavery. What the film does is show you that that is the case without actually showing you it. You don't get to see it actually happening.
Right.
So that is important, and I do feel that the filmmakers did that on purpose.
Yeah, I think so too.
To make it palatable for people to know the history, that it was brutal, but not actually see it on screen.
Go see it. Yeah,
you don't have to always see the full brutality on screen.
And
there are war movies that that war is brutal. You know war is violent, but you don't get to see a person's head explode. Right. You know, you don't get. But then there are other war movies that show you a head explode. So everybody can't see all of those things. And I think this is one of those films, or the filmmakers did it purposefully. They showed you that slavery is brutal, but you don't actually get to see all of that brutality in the film.
Right, and I totally understand that, and I don't want to see a lot of the brutality, because as somebody who studied this type of information for 27 years, I've read slave narratives. I found myself breaking down, crying, reading a slave narrative about Henry Bibb. Okay, separated from his mother. I think he was like 4 years old. All right, and so you don't have to show that the extremes of the brutality inflicted upon African people in the movie to make your point.
That's right.
What was more important is the history surrounding it. But at the same time, why would you want to see that type of brutality? And if we talk about the trauma that's inflicted upon us from seeing African Americans shot and killed by police in viral videos, then what type of impact do films that show the extremes of the horror inflicted upon us and the brutality inflicted upon us? What type of impact does that have on us as well? Let me share this here. So this article from the New York Times. I've got about 7 or 8 articles for you all, so I hope you all write these down. October 23rd, 2019, Harriet Tubman, Facts and Myths, How the Movie Tried to Get It Right. On page 2, I'm just going to share this paragraph with you here. Among the sources that the filmmakers consulted was the first biography about Harriet Tubman, Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman, 1869, by Sarah Hopkins Bradford, we talked about earlier. And this was a problematic book that included several inaccuracies, the number and nature of her rescues, for example, and set the stage for inaccurate accounts about Harriet Tubman to come. Now, Sarah Hopkins Bradford, who was white, interviewed Harriet Tubman, but, quote, she was used to writing about Peter the Great, Christopher Columbus, these great white men, end quote, said Kate Clifford Larson, who's author of the Tubman biography Bound for the Promised Land. And Kate Clifford Larson is also an advisor on the film Harriet. Kate Clifford Larson went on to say, quote, so when she listened to Harriet Tubman, she just didn't pay attention. And she also had her own racist views about black people, so the language she used in the biography was offensive. And we talked about one of the among the oftentimes repeated myths about Harriet Tubman. And until recently, I saw this and I thought it was true, but I didn't see a lot of documentation for it. But there was a $40,000 bounty on her head, a preposterously high figure at the time. That'd be millions of dollars a day.
That's right.
When the reward for the capture of John Wilkes Booth was $50,000. I can't remember if I said John Brown earlier, but John Wilkes Booth, $50,000. So John Wilkes Booth, for those who don't remember, killed Abraham Lincoln.
That's right.
The bounty for him was $50,000. Quote, Larson said, if it were that high, $40,000, she would have been caught. Larson said in the film, we see posters citing a more reasonable $200 to $300, but the research I've seen shows the bounty was $100 for her.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, go ahead, brother, because I know you have a few more minutes.
So again, there's outside issues that people have a problem about this film, and I don't want to address those outside issues. I think each one of those outside issues deserves its own forum, and on some level, I understand.
Right.
So I understand that people have a problem with Comcast. I understand that people have a problem with the sister who plays, Harriet Tubman. So
Right.
these are outside issues that ought to be discussed. And if you feel that you can't separate these two things, then I understand your convictions of not seeing the film. But if you're
But
talking
hold that
about-
same standard
Yeah.
for all the other
Yeah,
movies too.
I hope that people are consistent
Yeah.
in their outrage. I do hope that they're consistent. But then the other thing is, I want to deal with the history, because of course I'm a historian, so I want to deal with the history part of the film, and that the film is not perfect because it's not a documentary. It's not
Right.
meant to just highlight only historical facts. It's a film. It's a feature film. It's trying to attach or grab a larger audience than people who are just interested in history. And so because of that, I go to the film expecting that they're going to have some what we call Hollywood in there.
Yeah.
I go in expecting that. But what they highlight that are historical, that is historically accurate, what they highlight is so important that it overthrows the historical inaccuracies of the film. Because the things they highlight are so important and ought to be seen on a large screen. You ought to see the fact that black people are the leaders of the Underground Railroad on a large screen.
Right.
You ought to see the fact that faith and freedom go hand in hand for black people in the 1800s on a large screen. You ought to see that women are leaders and activists in the Underground Railroad and the abolitionist movement on a large screen. You ought to see who William Steele is and learn a little bit about this man on the large screen. So some of these things you ought to have seen in a real film, because we've seen, of course, Schindler's List won an Oscar, a whole bunch of them. We've seen films about Vietnam that have won Oscars. We have seen films about presidents like Lincoln that have won Oscars.
Right.
But when it comes to films about African American history, we are going to be sticklers about history and not go see the film. Some of us are so sticklers about history. Like Lincoln, that film was totally accurate. But it won an Oscar, and people went and see it, and people still see it. Schindler's List. That wasn't the full historical story of Oscar Schindler, but we went and saw it. We went to see all of those Vietnam films and those World War II films. The one that Tom Hanks won the Oscar for.
Forrest Gump.
Not Forrest Gump. It's about the brothers.
Okay.
One brother gets brought back. He's trying to come back because his brother died. I can't think of the name of that film for right now, and just so many of those films that have all kinds of historical inaccuracies about them,
Right.
And they're accepted. But when the black film has some, and let me be clear, there are films we like,
Yeah.
that have a whole bunch of historical inaccuracies.
Because I was about to come to Malcolm X and Rosewood. I was about to come to that. Yeah.
Hidden Figures.
Yeah.
Selma.
Yeah.
These are great films. But all of them have significant historical inaccuracies. But what they have is what they highlight is so important that we
Right.
see that overthrows the historical inaccuracies in the film.
Let me come to this quickly, man. So, one, in the green room, you and I were talking about this. So, one, Malcolm X. I love the movie Malcolm X,
Yeah.
right? But there were historical inaccuracies.
whole
First of
bunch.
all, Brother Baines didn't exist.
No, he's a creator. He's a composite creator.
He's probably a composite character.
Yeah.
Now, there was an old African American prisoner named John Bembry.
Yep.
John Bembry was the one who told Malcolm to use that time in prison to educate himself. Malcolm was already studying and reading before he found out about the Nation of Islam from his siblings.
That's right.
Okay? So Brother Baines didn't exist. Also in the film Malcolm X, which is a fantastic movie. When it came out in 92, I went to go see it twice, and then I watched it every time it came on cable. Muhammad Ali is not depicted in the film. How you talk about Malcolm X and don't talk about Muhammad Ali?
Right.
When we look at the movie Rosewood from John Singleton,
That's right.
excellent movie.
Great.
The main character played by Bing Rames is a fictitious character. The character of man did not exist.
That's right.
I did a lecture this past February for African American History Month dealing with the film Rosewood. There were a number of historical inaccuracies.
Yeah.
The character of Sylvester Carrier, played by Don Cheadle, okay? He didn't ride out of the town in his mother's coffin. He was killed on his on his porch. After they shot his mother, Aunt Sarah, he shoots two of the deputies and he gets shot.
That's right.
So, but to make the film, if they told like the real story that actually happened, nobody would have gone to see it.
People been so sad. Yeah, they've been like, there's no redeeming.
Exactly.
Story. Yeah, no redeeming part of the story.
So a lot of times, I think that the character of Man, played by Bing Raines, former World War I veteran, who uses military strategy to defend the women and children and fight back and get them to safety, he was probably a composite character of other historical figures that did similar things
in other places, in other events.
Well, not just that, maybe they're in the town, but to consolidate things, they put it into one figure.
Yeah.
You know, so this is what happens with these movies. Okay,
that's right.
Let's see. Okay, let's go quickly to Andrea, and then we'll let you get out of here. Andrea, thanks for calling. Welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for holding. Tell us where you're calling from, Andrea. From where?
And I basically just wanted to.
Where you calling from?
I think go to Harriet, New Jersey.
Okay, New Jersey. Go ahead.
And I basically wanted to hear about this because I want to know about the film. And I did go to a museum where they kind of like show this kind of thing. So I wanted to see how accurate everything was.
Sure. I'm going to give you some more articles, so keep listening and write down these articles. Go ahead, sister.
Okay. And basically one day we ended up, somebody, I'm wondering because I work at some charge service, and one of my clients actually started talking about the film. And I was telling her about the historical figures that they have in.
Repeat your question again. Repeat your question. There's some distortion in the background. Repeat your question again.
Okay, well, basically, because I work as a massage therapist, and one of my clients, one day we actually had a discussion about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. Because her and someone, we like when we go in family reunions, we usually go to like a historical
museum. Okay, when you go to family reunions, you usually go to a historical museum. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was telling her about what I saw there and what we didn't learn, and you know, they have all this stuff, all this information you would never find out.
Right.
While you're in school, it's like.
Which museum did you go to? Which museum did you go to?
It was, I can't even think of the name, but it was in Atlanta. It wasn't in Lancaster, but it was.
In Atlanta?
Pennsylvania. No, it was in Pennsylvania. But
Pennsylvania?
It's a place right now, but they have lots of different things. And
Okay.
So.
Okay, absolutely. And we need to go support these museums like the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History.
That's right.
Despite the problems that they have.
That's right.
All right, Andrea. All right, thanks for calling, sister. Go ahead, Jamon, with your final statements.
All right, so one of the things that films like this do, and Selma did it, and Hidden Figures did it, and Rosewood did it, and Malcolm X did it, is it creates a fervor. And the movie where Denzel plays the brother that got out of prison, who was,
He Got Game?
No. It's a film about a boxer. He's a boxer.
The Hurricane. Reuben Hurricane Carter.
Yeah.
And I never knew about Hurricane before that movie.
One thing that these films do, none of them are 100% historically accurate.
Right.
But one thing these films do, it creates a fervor for us to go research these people.
Exactly.
And research these events. And it comes out a flurry of articles, a flurry of documentaries, a flurry of specials that tell more of the true history. So even though the film is not 100% accurate, people are going to find out way more information about Harriet Tubman than they knew otherwise. Because once a film comes out, it creates this clamor for information. You can go visit the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Visitor Center.
Right.
It's part of the National Park Service. It is located in Maryland, in Church Creek, Maryland. And it opened just a couple of years ago. And I would advise everybody to go there because there's information at that museum, that visitor center about Harriet Tubman that you're not going to see in the other museums.
Right.
Not even at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture are they going to have as much history and information about Harriet Tubman as they have at the Harriet Tubman National Visitor Center.
You know, and I want
Yeah.
you to let people know about the tours you give.
Yeah,
You know,
yes.
when people talk about the black bounty hunter, black slave catcher, being the villain and things like that. Well, one, you dispelled that myth. The main villain. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
Two, to me, what I take away from that is that's an example of what happens to sellout Negroes, right?
Yeah.
Who are hired by their oppressor to do harm to their own people.
Wow.
They get done in by the oppressor.
Wow.
That's an example. See, in all the criticism, I never saw anybody make that analogy. You know, like look at what happened to Omarosa. She got dragged out the White House. see, this is what happens when they get their wake up call. That's an example. He got the ultimate wake up call, or he ain't gonna wake up. That's what happened to him. Let people know about the tours you give, brother.
All right, so yes, I am Jamon Jordan. I'm the historian and tour leader for Black Scroll Network History and Tours. I lead tours dealing with African American history. I also give lectures dealing with African American history in and around the city of Detroit. You can find my tours by going to Black Scroll, like a scroll of paper, Scroll Network .weebly, WEEBLY.com. Black Scroll Network WEEBLY.com. You can also go on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Black Scroll Network History and Tours. Black Scroll Network History and Tours. You can see our public tours. You can also contact us by either of those, our website or our Facebook page, and our email address is on both. My email address is on both of those sites, the website and the Facebook page. You can contact us about booking a tour for your church, your school group, your work, your youth group, your family reunion. We lead all of those tours. We lead walking tours, bus tours, but our tours focus on African American history. So if you want to do a tour about the Underground Railroad in the city of Detroit, we do those tours. If you want to do a tour about Motown, we do those tours. You want to do a tour about civil rights in the city of Detroit, we do those tours. If you want to do a mixture, some civil rights, some Underground Railroad, and some Aretha Franklin and Motown, we do those tours too. You can contact us by either of those email addresses. I am also the president of the Detroit chapter of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH. And that organization was founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson in 1915. The Detroit chapter meets on the second Sunday at 3 p.m. at the Charles H. Wright Museum. The second Sunday at 3 p.m. at the Charles H. Wright Museum. Come join us at our meetings to find out more about what we do. Thank you.
All right, Jamon, thank you. All right, everybody. Now, what I'm going to do is the other topics I was going to talk about, we ain't going to deal with this. We're going to stay right here on this. I got more information to give you, more articles, more myths to dispel. And then I will play the lecture I gave last week in Richmond, Virginia. That's only 13 minutes. Okay, stay tuned. You listen to the African History Network show, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Right.
Okay, man.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate
you.
All right, man. Always.
Yep.
Peace. All right, guys. Stand by. We'll be back in a few minutes. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Okay. We can set this up. If you want me to speak at your Kwanzaa event, all right? Because the Charles H. Wright Museum, they're only doing Kwanzaa one day. They're doing the first day Umoja, so I'm going to be out of the state. Okay, speaking. When we come back from the break, I'm going to give you more articles. Read these articles. Share these with your children. Have your children, when I was in school and we had, like in my world history class, we would have current events. So we could bring in articles about current events, things like this, and share with the class. Have your children take some of these articles dealing with the real history of Harriet Tubman into the class, all right? We'll be back in a few minutes. Also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And also, we have Hidden Colors 5 available at our website also. For each copy of Hidden Colors 5 that you purchase, you'll get three digital downloads of my lectures also, okay? Hidden Colors 5, The Art of Black Warfare, available right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. Stand by, everybody. And we see John Ray on also. Visit his website, workingwithjohnray.com.
10 seconds.
And you can find out about how to free up money in your budget to do what you want to do with it. Okay? Workingwithjohnray.com. Okay.
I'm going to go to the bathroom after
All
this.
right, okay. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation and Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We are further into our second hour, all right, and we're discussing the film Harriet, about the life of abolitionist Harriet Tubman, escaped from slavery in 1849. The movie has sparked controversy. It did $12 million this weekend. We just had historian Jamon Jordan on to talk about the film. He saw the movie. I haven't seen the movie. I read a lot about it, a lot of accurate information about it. One. Two, a lot of historical information about Harriet Tubman. I have more articles to share with you. So the topics I was going to talk about, I already did a Facebook Live broadcast and YouTube video dealing with Black Women's Equal Pay Day, okay? I'll give you a couple articles dealing with that. Go watch those videos. Follow me on YouTube, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Go watch that video. I did almost an hour. We'll try to squeeze in a little bit information about John Conyers, and I'll have to do a separate broadcast dealing with the new study about all living people having a common ancestor, an African woman from Botswana 200,000 years ago. All right, now, before the break, I was talking about the article, Harriet Tubman Facts and Myths, How the Movie Tried to Get It Right. And let's see here if there's anything else I want to share from that article, because I have all this stuff highlighted. I was up late last night reading through all these articles. So one of the things they talk about here, and this was written by Robert Ito, okay, October 23rd, 2019, New York Times. So the film depicts Harriet Tubman leading a military raid. That was the Combahee River Raid, June 2nd, 1863 in South Carolina. Let's see. Oh, one of the important things, and Jamon didn't mention this, but one of the important things in this movie also at the beginning, the filmmakers included several lesser-known episodes of Harriet Tubman's life, including one episode that opens the film in which a young Harriet Tubman hires an attorney to examine the will of her mother's former master, only to discover that her mother and hence herself were legally free. If there were cases of African Americans hiring attorneys and suing for their freedom, one of the most well-known cases is of Elizabeth Freeman, also known as Mum Bett, B-E-T-T, I think is how it's spelled. Elizabeth Freeman, and this was in Massachusetts, right around 1780. Okay, and she now Massachusetts was was this Massachusetts? Yeah, is right around 1780. Okay, and she found out about a clause in the state constitution of Massachusetts. History.com has a good article about this. And she hired an attorney and sued and got her freedom. Meet Elizabeth Freeman, the first enslaved woman to sue for her freedom and win. History.com, April 3rd, 2019. Nearly 80 years before the Dred Scott decision, a midwife used the Massachusetts Constitution to fight for her liberty. Okay, so we're going to see cases like this. Now, of course, this wasn't the norm, but you're going to have these cases like this where African Americans are going to sue for their freedom and win. In 1780, the proclamation, "All men are born free and equal," rang out from the central square in the small town of Sheffield in western Massachusetts. The line was from the state's newly ratified constitution, read aloud from a proud public to hear. Read aloud for a proud public to hear. America's war for independence was raging, and like the rest of the burgeoning country, the town was gripped by revolutionary fear. But one woman who heard it, was not inspired. She was enraged. Elizabeth Freeman, then known only as Bett, B-E-T-T, was an enslaved woman who understood the irony in the declaration right away. All men are born free and equal. As she watched the men around her declare freedom from oppressive rule, it only stood to reason that she should do the same. Okay? So Elizabeth Freeman marched, by some accounts, immediately to the house of Theodore Sedgwick, Sedgwick, a prominent local attorney, and demanded a dramatic accounting for the hypocrisy. She wanted to sue the state of Massachusetts for her freedom. She said, "I heard that paper read yesterday that says all men are born equal and that every man has a right to freedom. I am not a dumb critter. Won't that law give me my freedom?" Okay? So she hires him and she sues and she wins her freedom. Okay? This is the first case of that. To read this article here from history.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. Meet Elizabeth Freeman, the first enslaved woman to sue for her freedom and win. Also, you can look at the 6-part series, African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross, that Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. has. And, you know, I'm critical of Gates in some of his assertions about the transatlantic slave trade and African involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, but I do give him credit. I've read dozens of his articles when he used to write for The Root. He does do some good research. African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross is on YouTube, all 6 installments. There's also a companion book that he put out that is to be read along with that goes deeper into the topics talked about in the 6-part series, because I read his book also. Okay, so get those. I already posted the link here from the National Park Service. Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Byway, myths and facts about Harriet Tubman. Okay, let's go through a few of these. I want you to read these, share these with your children. Harriet Tubman rescued 30 people in 19 trips. Now, this is what we've heard, and this is what one of the early biographies, the one by Sarah Bradford, postulated. But that's not true. The fact is, according to Harriet Tubman's own words and extensive documentation on her rescue missions, we know that she rescued about 70 people, family and friends, during approximately 13 trips to Maryland. Now, she didn't go all throughout the South. The other thing is, the majority of the Underground Railroad was up north, not in the South, okay? Because it's very dangerous in the South to be an abolitionist, all right? The majority of the Underground Railroad was up north. When you read the article that Gates wrote March 25th, 2013, who really ran the Underground Railroad, this is one of the things that it talks about. Now, during public and private meetings during 1858 and 1859, Harriet Tubman repeatedly told people that she had rescued 50 to 60 people in 8 or 9 trips. Now, just so we understand, 1858 and 1859, she said this. The Civil War starts April 12, 1861. The Civil War is from April 12, 1861 to June 2nd, 1865, all right? So this is Harriet Tubman saying this. Now, so in 1858 and 1859, Harriet Tubman repeatedly told people that she had rescued 50 to 60 people in 8 or 9 trips. This was before her very last mission in December 1860, when she brought away 7 people. Sarah Bradford, who we talked about earlier, the author Sarah Bradford, who wrote the 1869 biography about Harriet Tubman, exaggerated the numbers in her biography. Sarah Bradford never said that Harriet Tubman gave those numbers, but rather Bradford estimated the exaggerated number. Other friends who were close to Harriet Tubman specifically contradicted those higher numbers. We can just about name every person Harriet Tubman helped. In addition to family and friends, Harriet Tubman also gave instruction to another 70 or so freedom seekers from the Eastern Shore who found their way to freedom on their own. Okay? We already talked about the myth about the $40,000 bounty. All right? Another myth is Harriet Tubman rescued people all over the South using the Underground Railroad. That's not true. One, the majority of the Underground Railroad was not in the South. Not this one. This Underground Railroad that we talk about, the most popular one, this was formed in 1831. This is formed toward the end of chattel slavery. Now you're going to have another underground railroad that runs through Texas. Okay, Texas gets its independence from Mexico in 1836. There was an article, and I did a broadcast dealing with this some months ago. There's another article from History.com that deals with the Underground Railroad that ran through Texas, and it's estimated that 5,000 to 10,000 people would go from Texas into Mexico after Mexico gains their independence, and Mexico outlaws slavery. So Mexico gains their independence, I think it's about 1828, okay? And you're going to see Africans running into Mexico. Also, there was another underground railroad, or what people ostensibly call an underground railroad. Now, at the time, it may not have been called that, but there was another one going into Florida, because Florida was free territory up until about 1821, when Florida became U.S. territory, okay? So you had a lot of runaway slaves that were running away into Florida as well. So the History.com has an article, The Little Known Underground Railroad That Ran South to Mexico. The Little Known Underground Railroad that ran south to Mexico. We were doing everything we could to get free, okay? So we've been sold the myth of the happy slave. This is what we see in the original Birth of a Nation, directed by D.W. Griffith, that came out February 8th, 1915. Okay? In that movie, they depict the happy slave. But the history of slavery is contrary to that. The little known Underground Railroad that ran south to Mexico, unlike the northern free states, Mexico did not agree to return fugitive slaves. So the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 that we talked about earlier, that was signed into law by a slave master named George Washington. Then you had the Fugitive Slave Law 1850. Well, those fugitive slave laws didn't apply in Mexico. But one thing, when Texas gets its independence in 1836 from Mexico, it's 1836 that the Texas Rangers are formed. Not the Texas Rangers baseball team. No, the law enforcement organization, the Texas Rangers. But the Texas Rangers start out as bounty hunters who are hired by slave owners to go into Mexico and capture runaway slaves and bring them back to Texas. All right. There was an article dealing with this, and I'm going to see if I can pull this up. Let me see, because I did a broadcast dealing with. I talked about this in the same broadcast where I talked about how in the 1930s, because of the Great Depression, the U.S. deported 1.8 million people of Mexican descent to Mexico because they said they were taking white people's jobs. This is in the 1930s during the Great Depression. 60% of the people they deported were U.S. citizens. And when you read articles about this, it was Herbert Hoover, President Herbert Hoover, who kicked this off. Now, you got to understand history, okay? And this is one of the things I deal with when I speak out of town. I speak on this Black Agenda Tour. Once again, if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, now Kwanzaa is coming up, okay? And looks like the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, from my understanding, is just celebrating one day at Kwanzaa, which means 6 days are going to be free, or maybe all 7 days will be free. So email me at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Book me now, because I'm telling you, I'm in and out of town every week. Book me now. customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Herbert Hoover became president. Herbert Hoover ran for president in 1928 as a Republican. He and the Republican Party initiate and institute the Lily White Movement of 1928. This was a Southern strategy to push African Americans out of the Republican Party and to ignore our issues and concerns, especially the concerns about the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, which was rejuvenated by the 1915 movie, The Birth of a Nation. So they had a Southern strategy to get Herbert Hoover elected. He was running against a Northern moderate Democrat named Al Smith. What they did was the Republican Party, who was the party of Lincoln and the party of the abolitionists, And the Republican Party was founded by groups of abolitionists in 1850 as a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854, as a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. And the Kansas-Nebraska Act, what that did was, that left it up to the inhabitants of these new Western territories to determine whether or not they wanted to have slavery as opposed to it being dictated by the U.S. Okay? So as a backlash to that and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, and then also because of Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, 1852, you got to understand this chronology. 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which really exposes America to the horrors of slavery. Okay, its first year, it becomes an international bestseller. It comes out 1852. Its first year sells about 300,000 copies. And the book, the character of Uncle Tom was based upon a real life character of a former slave named Josiah Henson, who ran away along with his family from a plantation in Maryland, and they go up north and go into Canada. One of the things that the Fugitive Slave Act did of 1850, because now what this act stipulated is that bounty hunters and slave catchers could go into free territory and get runaway slaves and bring them back into slave territory. So if you were basically, what it's saying is, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 went further than the one of 1793. It's saying that even if you are in free territory, if you are a runaway slave, you're still a slave, even in free territory, and you could be captured and taken back to your slave master. So this, because of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, this caused more runaway slaves to go into Canada, where they couldn't be touched, okay, in general. So Josiah Henson and his family, they run away, and he goes into Canada. He works on the Underground Railroad, helps runaway slaves escape. He becomes a Methodist minister and an educator. He writes an autobiography. Harriet Beecher Stowe reads his autobiography, and she creates the character of Uncle Tom based upon the life of Josiah Henson. Uncle Tom in the book was the hero. He wasn't a shiftless, slave who did the bidding of the master, things like that. He was the slave who refused to beat black women. He was the slave who took cotton out of his bag, out of his sack. At the end of the day, put it in the sack of other slaves who didn't meet their quota, so they wouldn't be beaten. Sambo was the slave. That was the name of the character. Sambo was the slave who went behind Simon Legree and did the bidding of the slave master. Okay, so because of the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, this really exposes America to the horrors of slavery, and this galvanizes the abolitionist movement. Okay, 2 years after that, the Republican Party is founded by groups of abolitionists to be the counter to the Democratic Party. But over time, after slavery, Civil War, Reconstruction ends in 1877. With the Compromise of 1877, we go into the early 1900s. We have a rise in the Ku Klux Klan. We have a decline in the powers of the Republican Party. And we have more African Americans starting to move up north as well. Okay, 1915 is the beginning of the Great Migration. So the needs and concerns of African Americans are being ignored. So we go into 1928. What the Republican Party is doing is they're targeting 5 southern former Confederate states to get these southern segregationist Democrats to vote for Al Smith, who's a Republican. To do that, they have to ignore the needs and concerns of African Americans. This starts to shift the party realignment that pushes African Americans out of the Republican Party. And we're slowly going to go over to the Democratic Party because we find them to be more receptive to our needs and issues. So 1947, so first of all, President Roosevelt, who we were leery of, but we like Eleanor Roosevelt. So we saw President Roosevelt, Democrat, we saw him more receptive than some of the Republicans. We're slowly going to shift over. 1947, the Democratic Party, for the presidential campaign, they have a more pro-civil rights agenda. you have two main factions, the Northern Democrats and the Southern Segregationists, Dixiecrats. Strom Thurmond, who's a Democrat, runs for president as a Southern Segregationist Dixiecrat. Of course, he loses. It's going to be because of the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, things like this, that Strom Thurmond and others like him, the majority of them, are going to leave the Democratic Party. And where do they go? They go to the Republican Party. You're going to have a party realignment. But by 1960, 2/3 of African Americans had already switched over to the Democratic Party. They didn't switch over because of the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. That was 40 years in the making. You got to go back to the 1920s to understand that shift in that party realignment. June 25th, 1941, President Roosevelt signs Executive Order 8802, which desegregates the jobs, the Defense Department jobs in the Department of Defense. This is during the arsenal of democracy. This is about 6 months before the U.S. actually gets involved in fighting in World War II. At this time, they're making military weapons for the Allies. President Roosevelt did his address where he talked about how the U.S. could become the arsenal of democracy. So you had General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. They're getting government contracts to make military weapons. M5 Jeeps and B-24 Liberator bombers, things like this. And it's A. Philip Randolph, who founded the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters in 1925. A. Philip Randolph leveraged his power as president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters to force President Roosevelt to desegregate the jobs in the Department of Defense. A. Philip Randolph threatened to put 100,000 African Americans marching on Washington, in Washington, D.C., to embarrass Roosevelt if he did not desegregate those jobs. So many African Americans moving up from Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee, moving up to Detroit, moving up to other cities, working in the, getting jobs in the Department of Defense, and moving into the middle class. That's because A. Philip Randolph leveraged his position with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters to push an agenda. Okay, so we saw that the Democrats were more receptive, not perfect, but over time we're seeing them being more receptive to our needs and concerns. Did we get everything we wanted? No, we didn't get everything we wanted. But we're being pushed out of the Republican Party, increasingly ignored in the Republican Party. This was about us pushing an agenda, us pushing a political agenda. That's why that happened. We have to study that history. Okay, there was an article from House.gov that deals with party realignment. I've done a 3-hour lecture dealing with this also, by the way. So that's how I understand this, because I had to do the research. But there's a good article from House.gov that deals with party realignment. What's House.gov? The official website of the House of Representatives. They have a whole history section there. All of my DVD lectures are available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We also have them on digital download, a lot of them on digital download. We have a current bundle. So we have a weekend sale. We have a current bundle pack also, 6 DVD bundle pack, 6 digital download bundle pack, Black Migration 1619 to 2019. It includes my presentation on Black migrations, which was this year's theme for African American History Month, by the way. There's an annual theme each year for African American History Month. And Black migrations was this year's theme. A lot of us don't know there's an annual theme. So we'll post the link here once again for that, and it's also available at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And we have this 6 DVD bundle pack in digital download format. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple more of these articles, and then we're going to go to this the video of my presentation that I did in Richmond, Virginia. Another good article, Harriet Fact Check. Harriet Fact Check. How accurate is the new movie about Harriet Tubman? This is from USA Today. Harriet Fact Checked. How accurate is the new movie about Harriet Tubman? Does Donald Trump know that Harriet Tubman is dead, or does he think Harriet Tubman is still alive, like he thinks Frederick Douglass is still alive? I'm just curious. Is Donald Trump going to invite Harriet Tubman to the White House? I heard your movie did really good this weekend. Can we get Dr. Ben Carson? Can we get Harriet Tubman to the White House? Can we get it? We're gonna bring Candace Owens and all these other because Harriet Tubman was a Republican, so we're gonna get all these black Republicans wearing MAGA hats, and we're gonna invite Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass to the White House. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't the blacks love me if I did that? Well, don't you think the blacks would love me if I did that? Okay. He's dumb enough to do that too. All right, 5 myths about Harriet Tubman. 5 myths about Harriet Tubman. This is from April 22nd, 2016. This is by Kate Clifford Larson, who is the author of the book about Harriet Tubman, Bound for the Promised Land, Harriet Tubman, Portrait of an American Hero, and she was a consultant and advisor on the film Harriet also. And then, let's see, what's this other article here? This is another good one. This is from History.com. After the Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman led a brazen Civil War raid. After the Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman led a brazen Civil War raid. Okay, let's go to this. This is the presentation I did at the Pan-African Unity Festival in Richmond, Virginia. Was this last weekend, whatever date that was, October 27th. I'm dealing with black migrations, Dr. King, Malcolm X, a whole bunch of other stuff. Let's go to this clip. Turn up in here.
We're going to bring up Brother Michael Imhotep. Now, one thing I should point out, we got a program that's called Africa on the Move every Sunday. A brother called in, he said, listen, if African people were so great, who were kings and queens? Why on earth, when you look at the current situation confronting African people, why are we so poor and disorganized? Well, obviously the brother doesn't understand the power of history. And so therefore, his analysis is that essentially that what people said to him in terms of the greatness of African people is somehow wrong or erroneous. So today, to clarify some points of history, we got a brother all the way from Michigan. This brother is powerful. Listen to every word he has to say. Without further ado, please get your hand up for Michael Imhotep.
All right, how's everybody doing today? All right, okay, now I know it's later in the day, but y'all can do better than that. How's everybody doing today? All right, good. So I want to thank Brother Hakeem, Brother Lee, everybody involved in putting this together. I was speaking in Washington, D.C. Friday and Saturday with Michi X on the Black Agenda Tour. So my voice is going out a little bit, so just bear with me, okay? All right, so how many people celebrate African American History Month, Black History Month? All right. What was this year's theme for Black History Month? Anybody know that? Now, there's an annual theme each year. There has been an annual theme going back to 1928. How many people know there's an annual theme for Black History Month, which is now African American History Month? One person? Okay. So this year's theme, at the same time, this year's theme was Black migrations. Black migrations, okay? And not just dealing with the migration or the forced migration of African people during the transatlantic slave trade and dealing with 246 years of slavery in this country from 1619 to 1865, but also dealing with the Great Migration of 1915 to 1970, where you have 6 million African Americans migrated from the south up north and out west, which totally changes this country. So the professor who just spoke, he talked about the New York Times project, the 1619 project, and I've done some presentations dealing with this. So for those who are not familiar with me, I'm Michael Imhotep, host of the African History Network show, founder of the African History Network. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. Be sure to come visit my table over there, have my DVD lectures that I've done dealing with our history. So this year's theme is Black migration. The theme is not just to be celebrated and commemorated for the month of February, it's to be studied all year round, all right? So that theme ties into today's theme, which deals with 400 years as well, and deals with Pan-Africanism, okay, and we have to unite or perish. So, very quickly here, this 400-year anniversary of August 20th, 1619, in Hampton, Virginia, not Jamestown, at Point Comfort, okay? But in 1619, when those 29 Africans come in on the English pirate ship called the White Lion, codified slave laws did not exist in any of the 13 colonies in 1619. How many people know this? Codified slave laws did not exist in any of the 13 colonies. The first British colony in this land that had codified slave laws was Massachusetts in 1641. They come to Virginia in 1661. Okay? Those 29 Africans will be put into a form of indentured servitude. Okay? Why y'all looking at me like I'm crazy? Read Before the Mayflower by Rome Benton Jr. He breaks this down in chapter 2. The whole way this thing evolved is not how we think it actually happened. The whole way it happened is not how we've been taught that it happened. Okay? Now, 1526. How many people saw you all saw a lot of talk about 1619, right? I saw on MSNBC, CNN, we saw articles, we saw Republicans giving backlash to, Newt Gingrich was talking about it was racist for them to do this, all type of stuff like that. He didn't say it was racist for what was done to us. He said it was racist for them to report about what happened to us. Check that out. But how many people heard about 1526? 1526 in the territory today called South Carolina, where the Spanish were taking Africans into South Carolina and enslaving them 93 years before Jamestown, Virginia. Nobody know about that? Oh, you ain't been watching you haven't been following the African History Network, okay? Not only that, 1513, Juan Garrido comes into Florida with the Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon. Juan Garrido's from West Africa, born in West Africa in 1480. Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. talks about him. How many people saw the 6-part series on PBS, African Americans Many Rivers to Cross in 2012 that Gates did? Okay? I ain't a big fan of Gates, but he does do some good work, okay? He talks about Juan Garrido. He wrote an article for TheRoot.com, as I read dozens of his articles when he used to write for The Root, called Who was the First African American? This deals with the first African that we know of in this land by name. Juan Garrido, 1513. We go back tens of thousands of years before that. How many people familiar with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans for Africans, Documented Evidence? Anybody familiar with that? He's a friend of mine. I've interviewed him 13 times. I just interviewed him August 21st, 2019 to deal with this 400-year anniversary, but also deal with the African presence in this land going back at least 51,700 years ago, who were the Khoisan. In the territory today called South Carolina, the Khoisan come from southern Africa. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world. They have the oldest DNA on the planet. They were here. They built pyramid mounds up and down the Mississippi River. If you read his book, he breaks all this down. His book has 713 footnotes backed up by 7 peer-reviewed articles. But in 2004, Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina, just happens to be a white man, did a discovery in Allendale County, South Carolina. They found 13 different types of discipline, 13 different types of evidence that documented African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years. Artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. Okay? This type of information is being suppressed. Because, see, people understand that if African people understand that this was actually our land stolen from us, and we were here before Native Americans came into existence, you would have a total paradigm shift. So the truth has to be suppressed. The truth and the lie can't coexist in the same space at the same time. All right, so I said that to say this. When we talk about Dr. King and Malcolm X, unfortunately, both of them are very much misunderstood. And when we have these Dr. King Day celebrations, most of them are disgracing his name. Okay? Because a lot of times, who disrespect anybody? I appreciate them putting together, but you got to do some research on Dr. King. How many books did Dr. King write? Who can tell me? I mean, okay, I'm 48. Who is here older than 48? Just curious. I'm just curious. All right, okay. So, Dr. King wrote 5 books, all right? His last book is probably his most important book. Where do we go from here? Chaos and Community. Wrote in 1967, okay? Now, when Malcolm X meets Dr. King, March 26, 1964, okay? Malcolm tells Dr. King, I'm throwing all of my effort into the heart of the civil rights movement. How many people do this? July 31st, 1963, when Malcolm is still in the Nation of Islam, Malcolm sends a letter to the leading civil rights leaders asking for a meeting with them, including Dr. King. This is the month before the March on Washington. March on Washington, August 28, 1963. Washington Post has an article dealing with the day Dr. King met Malcolm X. Read that article. It breaks all this history down.
Okay, they distorted the legacy of Malcolm, the legacy of Dr. King. These brothers have mutual respect for each other. They did not hate each other. Okay, they had some differences on how to get basically to the same destination, but there was mutual respect for one another. Even so far as one of the times when Dr. King was in jail in Alabama, Malcolm goes there and offers to provide protection for Dr. King. Okay,
right there.
Now, the other thing about Dr. King, a lot of people don't.
All right, so you can watch that full video. It's on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. We got to get out of here. The other thing I was saying, the next thing fact about Dr. King I was sharing is that in 1956, Dr. King tried to get a concealed pistol license in Montgomery, Alabama during the Montgomery bus boycott. That's not talked about. Okay, so email us customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization. Also, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email me customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. And we have these shows in audio podcast format also on 8 different podcast platforms. Wherever you get your podcast from, search for the African History Network show. And also on the homepage of our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on Listen to Podcasts, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on Listen to Podcasts. November 9th, I'll see you all in Houston, Texas. Shrine of the Black Madonna, along with Michi X and Dr. Shauna, Q Butter, and others on the Black Agenda Tour. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behaviors. Not over till we win Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.